basically, if you had money, glamour, and you were a little bit on the scandalous side, then you would probably get an invite to come to Mystique Island.
Welcome to our latest Book Reporter Talks to interview with our guest, Sarah McCoy. We are going to be talking about her latest novel, Mystique Island. A few years ago, Sarah told me that she was going to be writing about this topic, and we had a long conversation where I shared some stories with friends who were down there every Christmas and what I knew about the island just from there. And here she's bringing us back to the very early days of the island. The island was, well, we'll get into this. It's just beginning to find itself as a place where everyone goes, especially those who crave privacy. Because that's the one thing that's really big on the island. They don't want videos. They don't want any paparazzi. They just want everybody to be able to live their lives. So this is a Book Reporter Bets on selection, because by the time you finish this, you're going to want to book a ticket to go there. And you're also going to want to see how much this place has changed from what Sarah's described from those very, very early days, and how much has really stayed the same. So there's lots of armchair travel here. So welcome, Sarah. I am so glad to have you here to talk to us about this.
Oh, thank you for having me. And in case anyone out there doesn't know, I love this woman. I love you. She's fantastic. You need to sign up for everything she does. So thank you for having me. Every time I get together with you, whether that's virtually on email or anything, now that that's considered getting together, I leave feeling like I have hung out with a friend, a true lifelong friend. So thanks for having me on today. And for
reading. So great. I feel like I read a book and I feel like I know these people. I'm expecting a postcard any day. Like that's how much I feel like I know these people. So that was incredibly fun. So tell us about Mystique Island. Tell us about the book, first of all, besides me just drooling over it.
Yeah, well, you said it correctly. You were one of the first people that I told that I was writing a book about this island. And then you responded back, I know this island. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is fantastic. I'm going to pick her brain over and over for this. So the book opens in January 1972 when a Texan divorcee, Willie Mae Michael, she docks her boat on Mystique Island. And that's an exclusive enclave in the Caribbean. So guests included Mick Jagger, Bianca Jagger, Princess Margaret had a piece of land that she was given as a wedding gift by the owners, Colin and Ann Tennant, that she then developed into a palatial villa that became her private playground to do as it's interesting because she built it so that way she could be unroyal and do as she wished. And yet it was definitely a royal palace where she could do as she wished. So it's a lot of dichotomies like that, and where people were saying they wanted to be one thing and then they were another. So that was really interesting for me. So lots of fashion models. That was big in the 1970s, right? Fashion, Vogue models, actors were big. There were famous architects and gangsters. That was another thing that was super big in the 1970s. It's like gangsters were bad, but they were good bad. They were like that. Yeah, they're bad. So all of that, basically, if you had money, glamour, and you were a little bit on the scandalous side, then you would probably get an invite to come to Mystique Island. So all of that sounds like the stuff of fiction, right? It like sounds like, oh no. And if it was real, it's like, well, maybe back in like the old times, but no, this was in the 70s. I mean, for me, that's pretty contemporary. I have t-shirts that are probably from that time period still. I don't throw anything away. So I probably, that was really fascinating to me, that this sort of luxurious excess was happening in the 1970s. And by that, I mean, it was privately owned by Colin and Ann Tennant. They purchased an island and everything that was on it, including the land, even the people, even if you don't purchase people, I get it, but they were then residents and sort of the staff and persons
Mhm.
that had to do whatever their colonizing owner, the tenants, really wished. And if they didn't, they could leave, of course. That was the difference between sort of owning people, but they were owned to a degree. And again, in the 1970s, that was fascinating to me. So Willie Mae Michael docks on this island and wants to recreate herself. She has been blackballed from British society and she has no place else to go. So she comes to the island. She's beautiful. She's a ex beauty queen. She's a divorcee. Her husband was a British baron of money that he earned. So it was like a brewery that he came from. His family owned that brewery that she divorced, and then she got a huge amount of the settlement from his family business. So she had money, she had beauty, and she was looking for some place that would accept her as being a bit scandalous. So Mystique opened its arms to her, and she went there hoping to make anew, and invited her two daughters who were off in the world, sort of floating in, not knowing what they wanted to do with their lives either, to come and rebuild themselves with her. So that's how it starts. And from there we see, oh, wow, just how the island influences them and how they influence the island. And it's not all good or bad, black or white. And that's the journey.
That's the journey that we're all on. What drew you to write about this island specifically? Was there something that you read or saw and said, this is the island? I mean, it could have been any other island,
Right. And I was sort of in a weird place in my writing. I had just finished Merle of Green Gables, and that is a very different kind of island. Let's just, Prince Edward Island is in, and the fictitious Avonlea is very different from this one. So, but I didn't know what I was going to do next. And everyone was asking me, what are you going to do next? And I didn't really have an answer yet. And so when I get like that, I tend to then seek out, I let myself sort of float in the research, and I love history. So I went and I was watching documentaries. Like I just went on this binge where any documentary that came, I just wanted to watch it because I wanted something to tell me a story, because I didn't have a story inside my own head right then. So I started watching a documentary on Princess Margaret. Have it. And the rebel princess. And so I started watching that, and there was a little snippet that said that she'd been given a wedding gift of an island, a piece of an island. And I just thought, well, that's nuts. Who gives someone a piece of an island, and where is this island? And then it said, and it was in the Caribbean. And I thought, well, I know the Caribbean. I'm Puerto Rican, and I wrote my first book about Puerto Rico in the 1960s. Where is this, privately owned? What is going on? And then it said it was on Mystique Island, and I had never heard of it. And I'm a bit of a type A. And so when I don't know something, I need to figure it out. Like I need to find out. I need to fill that void in my own imagination and knowledge gap. And so I became a little obsessed with, what is this Mystique Island in the Caribbean, which is like my home territory that I do not know. I need to find out. And so I did what nowadays anyone does. I Googled everything that, I clicked on everything that came up on it. And I was shocked to find out that it was at the southern curve of the Caribbean islands and privately owned, and all the shenanigans that went on there. So that's really how it started for me. So once I started getting into the details of this island, I went and found, I wanted to know more, because I thought there's a story there. I thought authors, I'm sure you hear this all the time because you interview authors all the time, but there's a muse that sort of calls to us when there's a story. Like, listen to me, listen to me, listen to me. I'm going to tell you something. Come closer. I'm going to whisper something. And so I think that was happening at the time. And so I went online and I wanted to find out more like concrete evidence. I am a journalism major. And so I was like, you know, I'm not that old, but I'm from the old school kind of journalism where you went to the sources, you went to the library and you Dewey Decimaled and went and pulled things and you had a stack of books that you were making notes from. So I wanted something I could concrete. So I went and I found this. Yeah, this is, and I love that
I love it. I've never seen this. Is so visually cool. Yes.
This is Colin Tennant. This is his biography or autobiography. And it is crazy talk, let me tell you. So he wrote this, he put it out, published it, and I could only find this one copy. And I kept it in here because like I said earlier, I keep everything. And it was from this tiny little bookstore in Somerset in the UK.
Wow.
So I ordered it, I had it sent, and then I started reading. And the stuff that he was telling me, because I consider a book a contract between, you know, the author and me personally, whoever you are as a me, this is someone talking to me. And that's the way I write. And that's the way I read, is Colin is talking to me. And so he's telling me these stories as fact that, Carol,
come on,
what are you smoking? I almost said, and then I thought, well, I know what he was smoking. He tells you what he's smoking all the way through it. But they were just beyond scandalous. They were, I just couldn't, it was remarkable. So in one part of this, he mentioned that the people that he invited, besides his guests who were there to party, the people he invited to possibly invest in his island and become residents, he was the gatekeeper, and they had to apply and they had to be beautiful and rich enough. And he decided who was beautiful and rich enough. And so one of the people that he decided was beautiful and rich enough was a Texan ex-beauty queen, divorcee. And her real name was Billy Ray. And so that stuck to me when I saw that line in here about this Billy Ray, and that she was, and he wrote some line about she was so much fun to have around because she had such a unique American Texan accent. Like that was what made her, like, I mean, even that is so just distasteful to me, that he wanted little charms. He wanted each resident to be like a charm on his party chain that he could like pull out for a party and say, talk, give us that American accent. Isn't that fun? Everyone, isn't this fun? So that was interesting to me. And so I immediately heard her. And again, this is sort of my background, is I lived in El Paso for almost 10 years. I know those people. I know that woman. I know that woman is what I thought. And I thought she has a story, because Texan women who build their own boats and sail around by themselves and divorce their British husbands, they got moxie. They're not going to want to be someone's little toy on a chain. And so I thought, she's got a story. She's got a story. What made her come to this island? What made her say, okay, Colin, I'll let you treat me how you're going to treat me, but I'm going to put down roots here. Like, what made all that go down? And that's, the story was born right there. And I knew I had to dig into her. And of course, after that, everything I created out of fiction. So it's inspired by a real woman. Everything else is fictionalized. Changed her name. She is now Willie Mae in my book. Changed her the real person of inspiration had 2 daughters
Okay.
similarly, and I changed their names completely. They are still alive. The real inspiration, Billy Ray, has passed away. So I honor her spirit, and I honor also her living daughters by keeping their names anonymous and keeping them sort of their private life. I understand how important that is. So that's all. What was your question that started this?
No, it was like what drew you to write. So now I've got it. So wait, I also know you had plans to go there on March 30th, 2020. I know that because that's my anniversary. So I know March 30th, and COVID foiled your plan.
Oh,
So you've got the tickets, you're ready to go to do the research on the trip, and then can't leave, can't go. So you were right, you were headed there. So then what did you do? Like, I mean, I would get a little despair because I would also think that, remember, COVID was supposed to be 2 weeks. As one of my friends at the publisher said, no, they were going to go home. They were going to clean the office for 2 weeks and we were going to go back. And she said, I left all my shoes. So that's my favorite line. I left all my shoes, you know?
I know my editor said she left her entire snack drawer full of snacks that when she came back, it was like, ew, right? Because they were gone to rot now.
Well, people came back and plants were dead in their office and the calendar was still like, March. It was very, very eerie. It was very, very eerie. So you've got these tickets, you're all set to go. And then it's like, maybe we'll go later. And then it's like, we're not going. So how are you going to do all this research and without flipping out?
So yes, as you said, I think you might've been one of the first people too. I called and was like, oh my God, this is awful. But I mean, the timing just could not have been any worse. It really couldn't. So, and you know this, but it was not just me going. All of the tickets were ×2 because I was taking my husband with me. So all the expenses ×2. And I can, just to give other people who might be interested in going to Mystique and traveling there, this is what you have, at least for me, I had to do. From the East Coast, you go to Miami, then you take a plane to St. Lucia, and then you get off in St. Lucia because that's the US sort of airlines, right? In St. Lucia, you have to charter a plane, private plane, which I did for 2. Charter plane to St. Vincent. In St. Vincent, you get off and you take the ferry ×2 to Mustique Island. And then when you get to Mustique Island, because it's still privately owned, in order to get off and go into the island, you have to be hosted. And that's easy. That can be a hotel that hosts you. The Cotton House now remains the only hotel that you can get individual sort of bungalow and suites through. Otherwise, you have to rent one of the villas, right, for the week, which are like buku. And so we had a host that was going to take us on there called the Firefly, which is the actual name of the actual house that the woman of inspiration, my Willie May, she built that, and it is an actual place on Mystique called Firefly. That was the name of her house that got turned into a hotel, and I was going to stay there. And so we were going to stay there a week and booked it all. Very excited. And then all of it got canceled. And I think we got vouchers back for our US flights, and everything else
gone.
Gone. I emailed.
Did you go later or no? No.
Well, I called the people who owned Firefly at the time. Again, do you see all these at the time? Yes. Isn't that all? That should be the pandemic sort of like
at the time.
At the time, now different. So I emailed them and they said, we still have to pay our staff. We still have this booked, and I get it. And so they kept our money and they said, but you have, we'll give you like a year. You can come back anytime in a year and use that amount, or, do the week. And so I was like, well, I guess that's fair, because it should be done in 2 weeks, the pandemic. So, all right. So we, but then a year, as we all know, the year came and went. And then by the time that year was over, I went back to them and said, so we still couldn't travel. So can I use it still? And the Firefly closed.
Closed, right? They moved to another island. I Googled it
Well,
yesterday.
yes, there was actually, they had 2 locations. And they closed the Firefly one and just sort of refocused all their staff onto the other island. So now it's done. So now it's officially, I told my husband, like, we will never go because now it's actually closed. So that's okay. That's okay. I actually
You feel like you were there.
well, I got the 2 people really helped me work through this because, again, type A, I wanted to do it the way I wanted to do it. I have gone to every location that I have written about in all my work. So all my books, I've gone to the places I've written about, and I just felt like a fraud, a phony. I felt I was just self-flagellating that how can you do this now? You know, you have to go. And then 2 people really, really helped me out. One was George Saunders, the great and almighty. We were catching up on email and I wrote him and told him what we just discussed in my whole saga. And then he wrote me very simply back, which is very loving George Saunders. He said, it's 2020. Just Google it, Sarah. And I thought,
I love that line.
just Google it. I know it's in my acknowledgements because it was like
Yes.
a lightning bolt went off. And I just thought, if George Saunders is telling me just Google it and get on with the writing. And then he went on to tell me of some other people, some of his writing friends who just Google things and don't actually go to the locations, but I'm not going to give that away. That was private. But I was like, wow, okay. It was like he gave me permission. And then the second person was my editor, who, bless her, said to me, Sarah, we do remember that you are Puerto Rican and that Puerto Rico is like an island, like right there, like like the breezes that come off Puerto Rico, they're going right by Mystique. So I'm sure it smells kind of the same. I think you can use your background. And I thought, she's right. And I was in St. Lucia just recently, a few years ago on vacation, which is like right there. So I've researched that whole area so deeply and written a whole other book about it that I thought, it's the Caribbean. It's like saying you're from North Carolina. I mean, it's even smaller than that, really. And so I thought, okay, Sarah,
I could do this.
Right. So that's the story of the pandemic. And my husband said, well, would you go now?
Yeah, would you?
Yeah, I thought that was
Yeah.
interesting question. He actually asked me this while we were just in Paris, and he asked me this at a gala at the table with all of his surgeons around going, answer, Sarah. So that was a really interesting pressure point. And I said, I don't think I need to go because the island I have created, the fictional island, is here.
Right.
And so if I went, I would probably be not that I'd be disappointed, but it would be a totally different experience. It would not be this 1972 to 1976 Mystique Island. It would be a different experience. And maybe I would, but right now I'm more like, well, what's next? Okay, I've done this. Now I would actually want to go somewhere that has to do with my next book, probably next. So
it's funny because it's one of the places I've wanted to go simply because there aren't roads the house by name. And that's how you get to the house. The Firefly, or whatever the name of the house is, that's what you're renting. And when you look inside these places, friends who were down over the holidays, and they always send me the link to look at this house. And, there are 8 master suites and there's, there are pools and all. You don't have to leave the house. You don't have to leave and go anyplace. But what's really interesting is it is one of those places where your privacy is kept. It's like they really don't want the paparazzi there. If you report about what's going on there, you're persona non grata to come back. I mean, they really don't want that. And meanwhile, I just found it interesting that he bought this island for, I think it's 45,000 pounds, which was like $56,000. And that's what he bought the entire island for. And then they get into this money trouble, and his wife is just like, sell it and leaves. And she's just like, just get rid of this place. Like it's a money pit. And he had no concept of money whatsoever. So you've got the truth of what's really going on with him. And then he's got all these people that are coming. And I personally love the way he has everyone who dresses up in costume all the time. Like, we're having a party.
And he really did that.
They're
Yes.
really doing that. They're really, really still costume parties. Like you go down there with costumes packed for things to do, with themes.
It's people think that I made that up, that Colin would do, just for readers out there who haven't read it yet, he would do these welcoming parties for people, and he would have staff and whoever dress up in these like Victorian costumes that were actually from his like dead relatives and trunks, and they would dress up in like the top hats and the corseted things to welcome people. It was just strange. And that was something that was actually super important for me to dig into and to talk about, was not just the colonizers, because I feel like they always get the focus, right? The colonizers always get the focus of books because they are so outlandish and because they did write history. That's usually where we see what was happening during that time period, is through the lens of the people who wrote it down, which is usually the majority or the colonizers. And so it was so important for me as a Puerto Rican woman, coming from people who are farmers and of the land of the Caribbean, to talk and to give the islanders their story and to bring them to light and to show that they might have been under this colonization, but it was always their island. And I know you've met my character Titus, who I loved writing. He is an islander, and he is like a mix of like my grandpa is one of 13 children.
Wow.
And yes. And they all almost, I think just almost all of them live in Puerto Rico still. And most of them are boys. And so it was just this mix of all these just strong, smart men. And in Puerto Rico, they say that Puerto Ricans are all is like a rainbow, because everyone is every hue and color, and we are all one. And that's so very true. And so I thought, this is my opportunity to show that sort of spirit of the people, of the islanders. And Titus has been educated. He's a businessman. He went to university. He is all these things that you would see or hear about in a Westerner or a colonized person. But because he is from the island and because he is of color, they think that he isn't so smart, or that he isn't as effective or an authority. And he doesn't, he uses that. He's like, if you're gonna, if you're going to
pigeonhole me, it's gonna like pigeonhole me. Yeah.
If you're not going to give me the respect, then I will do my work to not to earn it. He doesn't feel like he needs to earn it, but he is going to be in control of his island. He never lets his own personal control be taken away by the colonizers. And that was super important for me. So writing that was wonderful. Writing all of the, and this was one book where the minor characters really, they just became such lights for me. They were the guiding forces. Whereas the main characters were trying to figure themselves out. They were trying to they were so flawed, beautifully, but terribly flawed, and trying to reinvent themselves and establish themselves. And the islanders are the ones who are these strong supports there in this story. And for me too, as a writer, they were my strong support. So I loved showing that in this book.
Yeah. And it's not like just that was a command performance that they went and did. They did it because they were supposed to. But by the same token, I'm sure they all walked home and said, oh gosh, I can't believe what we just did again. I mean, again.
And they were getting paid. This is where they were smarter, because they were like, You know what, Colin Tennant, if you're going to pay me double my salary to put on a top hat and smile for an hour, who's the fool in this? Give me
Yeah.
the money and you go do your foolish thing. And yeah, exactly. And then I'm going to go home to my family. I'm going to have double my salary for the day. I mean, that is business smart, not Colin, not what
Yeah.
he's doing. So,
Well, Colin, and
and
they were constantly trying to tell him, you don't know what you're doing. You don't know how to run this. You don't know what you're doing at all. And I mean, this is also, let's click here for a second. This is a mother-daughter story as much as it is the story of the island. Did you always know you're going to head in that direction, that mother, because you really have a lost mother and two lost daughters, and everybody's leaning on each other, but like really we're leaning on things that are falling over, it's
yeah, um, as I told you, the inspiration for this came from that line about this woman. So that was my character that drew me first. And then I found out she had two daughters. If she had a son and a daughter, I probably would have written that in, but she had two daughters. Um, and again, there's that weird, that spidey sense connection that I can't explain. I just can't explain. I don't know why, but so that was the facts of it. And then I don't have sisters, but my mother is one of three, and so she has sisters. And I grew up with my TTs and my grandma in the kitchen listening to their stories. I love them beyond able to express words right now to you. Like, I love them so much, and I love that sisterhood, mother-daughter culture. I love all of that. And I also, being not of it, not having a sister, I would sit in the kitchen and listen to my mom and her sisters, and my mom and her sisters and my grandma interact, and be able to look at it from almost an objective,
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
I wasn't emotionally tied to their fights. And they're like, you said this, why'd you say it that way? What's going, and they're Puerto Rican too. So my God, can you just imagine?
Volatile.
So yes, very volatile. Yes. And so I was always fascinated by how they could fight so hard and then an hour later love so hard. Like, that was an hour ago, and now we're all like laughing and hugging and everything, we're going to get over this. So I just always found that so beautiful, and maybe I longed for it in a way, because I'm the eldest in my family. I have two brothers, baby brothers, and it's just a very different dynamic
Mhm.
in that. And so I maybe because I'm not gonna say maybe, because I don't have a sister. I think I write a lot about sisterhood and about women's relationships, because I'm exploring that fictionally for myself. I get to then have a sister in my imagination through my books. So that's definitely, that was a draw there. It's a unique bond that I think um you just can't, there's nothing like sisters and that mother-daughter. There's so many areas where you're jealous,
Mhm.
and yet you are their biggest champion,
Mhm.
and you love them, and then you can hate them. You can feel neglected by them, and then you can feel like they're the only person who actually understands you and knows you through and through. So I just find that really, really interesting. So
Mhm. Well, there's this really interesting line where Willie Mae says along the way, for nearly 30 years, as Mrs. Harry Michael, turning a blind eye to his dirty secrets and sweeping who she was under the carpet. That's what she was doing. In the end, she tripped her nearly broke her neck on that lumpy rug. There were no carpets on Mystique. The soles of her feet tread on cool stone. The grit of sand between her toes reminded her that her life in England was dead, and she was not. And she's saying so much here. Was creating that backstory for her something you did before you even started writing her being on the island?
hmm, I did. Yeah, I write my way into books. So I did. I wrote sort of her meeting of her husband, and then how their love affair so quickly led her, because she met him in the United States when he was training the British Air Force would come to Texas, and they have a little area that they would train. And I know this actually still goes on, because when I lived in El Paso, the German Air Force had a training facility right up the road in New Mexico. And there were all these Germans that were there. And that's how I wrote The Baker's Daughters, because of that sort of situation. And so there was a connection there. And I thought, so she's in Texas, and there's a bunch of British young men. And I mean, the British accent alone is so sexy. What American woman would not be? What is going on? Hello, come talk to me. So I knew, again, that culture, and I had ties to that. And then, so I wrote her love story, and I wrote her into England, and how that would have been such a culture shock to go from Texas, and where your parents are day laborers, and then be in this British society where it's all about title, and it's about who you come from, and your heritage, and your crests, and your money, and how shocking that would have been. So I wrote into it, and then this always happens. Oh, it's so painful. But then I go back, usually at the end of the book, my editor will say, all right, so now where does the story actually start? And then I go to the front that I just wrote the backstory, and I chop it off. I've done it almost every single book. I chop off like the first 80 pages. And then I pull that 80 pages out, and I go through and I pick scenes that are actually the most significant. And I go back in to where the story actually starts, which for me, it was 1972 with Willie Mae docking on the boat. And then I plug in the necessary scenes throughout. I sort of like dabble them in, it's like salting your work or something, just to give the reader a little more depth of flavor on what's going on. So that's how I did her backstory. So I wrote the whole book from start to finish, and then I
went back. Well, you did this really interesting thing where you wove the history of the island in well. So there's a photographer named Patrick, and he's photographing Willie Mae on the beach, and he's telling her the story behind the island. So instead of having it be tell, he's telling her the story. So did you know that you had to say more about this island? Which character was going to tell it? Somebody's got to tell the story, and it can't just be you going, and then this happened, and then that happened,
Right. There was nothing there's a lot of things I dislike more, but something that bothers me in literature is when I feel like the author, the authorial voice, is telling me something like here's some information, or here's a political idea, like here you go, here's an emotion you should be feeling right now in this scene. I don't like that. It makes me feel like, all right, I just got force fed, and I'm okay. Thank you for that. So I definitely didn't want to do that, but I knew that the history of the island was the history being before Colin Tennant was so interesting. And Patrick Lichtfield is a real person. The photographer is he's passed away, but he was real, and he was a famous photographer. And so I thought, what a great venue, or not venue, but a vessel he would be, to be a real person who could then give real facts about the island. And he's just there enough that it could be like he would be a resource, and yet we wouldn't have to know, well, emotionally, why is he giving this information, to Willie Mae? It could just be like, just a fact that he gives to her in a very unique way, with also the sexual tension going on in the background, which makes that fact more interesting. Suddenly it's like a little like, ooh, because there's in the present story, there's a sexual tension that then gives weight to the backstory. So it's a nice little like leveling of that.
Like on a seesaw, we're going back and forth to seeing what's going on. Yeah. Him telling it is, I love that it was supposed to be a cotton farm at somewhere along the way, and the cotton didn't work out. It's got to be a big plantation, didn't work out. So, okay, now what are we going to do with it? Oh, we'll make it a playground. We'll make it a playground for all these people. And then Princess Margaret gets this plot. And in 1960, he gives her the plot. In 1968, he formed the Mystique Company. So it's like really crazy. And he decides he's going to make this private island hideaway for the rich and famous. Now, the princess being there up the whole like mystery of the place. It's just da da da. And the paparazzi are off the beach with boats, and they're trying to get boats to keep them from coming in. How much fun was it to write those sections where that's just all that tension is building on the island?
Okay, at the same time that I was writing this, The Crown like bust out on Netflix, and I was just, oh my gosh, this is so fantastic. So I had so much fun writing Princess Margaret. And like I said, it all started with me watching this Rebel Princess documentary, and yes, I'm so old school that I have CDs. People or DVDs. People are like, "That's a DVD. How do you even play it now?" I'm like, "Yeah, well." So I just I'm fascinated. I think we all are, aren't we, to some degree, with Princess Margaret. And just she was such a rebel, and she did so many scandalous things that even now we don't even know them all. And I loved her personality of just being so quippy, and I don't know, there's something very kindred in that, in all of us, that you can be a princess and you can also like use really horrific language, and because we all do that, right, in our private moments. And so she was so much fun to write. And I, at the beginning of this, I told you I am a big history nerd, proud nerd. And so being able to put in all of these wonderfully rich, true details about British aristocracy and the crown and their, all of this, that was a lot of fun. That was almost like, I'm getting paid for this. This is illegal, because this is fantastic. So I love that stuff.
Did she really get ordered home by the Queen? Was that something
yes,
that happened?
more times than we even know. The Queen apparently sent missives like, get your butt home from this playground island, like right now. Yeah.
Especially when she gets caught on the island with
Roddy Llewellyn, yes, which was her real life lover. Yes.
Yeah, that was like great. Now wait a second. Now Willie Mae sails onto the island. Do you sail? Have you spent any time sailing?
I actually have. No one has asked me this question, and it's so funny that you have. I actually went when I was very young. I think I was 10. I went to sail camp, like 4-H sail camp. Yeah, I did a summer of sail camp. And so, but that was like one of those, it was like a 2-person little sailboat type thing. But I wouldn't say, yeah, no, and then I grew up in a family where so I did do that. So I know all the like fundamentals. And I grew up in a family where my father is an avid water skier. Okay. So I've been on like motorboats, but I've not been part of like a sail team or anything like that. No, but I do love the water and all things ocean, sea. It's in my blood. I love it.
That's my husband. My husband sailed. I did sail from Nantucket down to the Hamptons. I had a friend who had a boat, and he always wanted Tom, because Tom could actually navigate and he could figure out what's going on.
Well, if Tom wants to go to Mystique,
you'll go.
I will be on the boat.
Well, we still have this boat in the backyard. A Hobie. It's not a Hobie. It's something else. He liked it better than the Hobie. We still have it in the backyard. We haven't been on this thing in like 30 years, and I'm just there like, we still have it on this trailer in the backyard. And I'm just there like, could we ever go use this again? But I was impossible, because I want to relax on the weekend, and you actually have to work if you're on the boat, and you have to like actually do things. And he always just say those words, prepare to come about. And he goes, if you don't move, you're going to get clunked in the head. And I would just be like, no, I don't believe this. And then we'd always get like the furthest part out from the island. We'd get the furthest part, and the wind would die. And I do remember one time getting in the water and kicking the boat back, like just kicking in the water. I just got out and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that. And it was perfectly calm. And it was just kicking the boat back, as he sat on the boat trying to steer the boat. I was like, maybe. And he goes, no, you're not good enough to do that. We'll end up,
You could turn the boat in the backyard into like some sort of sun deck. I've
Yeah,
seen
we
people do
could.
that with the
We
boat.
definitely, it could be this, that maybe that's what we should be doing with it because it's really pretty funny that's back there. So
Okay.
the book's got sections. We got Willie Mae, Hilly Galatea, I guess is her name, Joanne, then Hilly again, and then Willie Mae. What was the thought? Like, did you do the section so that you had some grounding for yourself as you were writing to make sure each of those characters was the star? Or am I making that up, Carol? Go back to the
No,
boat.
no, that's actually very astute. Yes, I do. I never believe one character. I love my characters. I never believe one character. So I don't think, I was just trying to think if I'm thinking about my books, except for Marilla of Green Gables. All my books, I feel like have sort of revolving POVs because I don't think, again, it goes to history. I don't think that history can be told by one person. That's very dangerous. And I don't think that any one perspective, even in fiction, is ever the full story, ever. And so Willie Mae, the way she sees everything going down is one way, but I knew that there's another way. There's the viewpoint of Hilly, her eldest daughter, who is a Vogue model, and like what she's going through and how she sees her mother and what her mother's doing and what her mother wants from her and what she wants and what she needs. So the island is seen through her eyes. And then there's Joanne, who is a totally different character from her mother and her sister. And she's a lot more level and sort of introverted and quiet and just calm. She's a lot more British too, in that way, where keep calm, keep calm. And so I wanted to show how she sees the island and the dynamics going on there, and her mother and her daughter. And it's kind of, oh God, I feel like there's a game or something where you get one and then you add on to that. It's like the ants go marching one by one, and then the mans go marching two by two. That's kind of what this book is. So you get Willie Mae. She marches onto the island, and then you get another depth with Hilly, and then you get another with Joanne, and then I feel like the third section, or the fourth section, even though it is Willie Mae, is really a circling back. It's like all coming together. It's like all three women then come together. And now what are we doing in this new sort of Rubik's cube of who we are? So I wrote them each separately, and I needed to do that because I wanted to focus each, instead of going like back and forth. That was an option I could have done, Willie Mae and then Hilly and then Joanne chapter, and then do that pattern all over again. I actually wonder why I didn't do that right now. I'm like, why didn't I do that? I don't know. But
you invested in them for a longer period of time this way. That's what I felt. You really got to know them. And even the fact that Hilly's second section was not called Hilly Galatea, she's now just Hilly. She's changed her persona. So I think that was like, really important to do. I also love this line from Hilly as she hung a photo of her and the girls where they were laughing. And it's how easy it was to build a story around a moment, but forget the frame of reference. And that is completely poignant because she changes so much during the course of this book. But if you just look at this snapshot, it's like, I see this moment, but what is that moment really? What were they laughing about? Why were they laughing? You don't really know.
And that, that is a critical theme throughout this book, is that we are always, as individuals and as human beings, we are evolving all the time and transforming and changing, and hopefully for the better, but sometimes for the worse. But then after that, it's almost like the pandemic, it could get bad, but after this, let's rise up, let's find something, reinvent yourself, reinvention. And so because that was such a theme and a driver for me as I wrote this, I feel like I look at pictures of myself, of my younger self sometimes, and I say, oh, look at Sarah, oh, she looks so happy there. I was so, and because I've now said I look so happy, then I say, I was so happy there. And then that becomes the reality when if I actually stop and actually think about whenever that picture was taken and the context of it, a lot of times that was just a moment where I smiled for the camera and things that were going in the background. Not that they were bad, but they were just, they were
More
not
complicated.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, they were daily normal things. It wasn't like I was so happy there, but we tell ourselves a story that we then begin to believe. And I think, not to get all meta here, but I think in our contemporary world where Instagram
Oh, yeah.
and Facebook is so prevalent and such an influencer on our own emotional state of contentment as people, I think that we now are looking at these Instagram posts daily and saying, and everything is happy, right?
Yes.
Everything is
Yes.
like
No
so
child ever cries. No child
so
cries.
happy.
Yeah.
Everyone is so happy everywhere. And all of our photos are like, so happy, having the time of my life. This is so great. And it's just like this heightened unreality
Mhm.
of what our actual lives might be. And again, not that we're sad or not that we're depressed in real life and we're faking it, not that at all, but just it's not the memory that we are fictionalizing for ourselves. We
Mhm.
are, it's just different. And so, that is definitely something that I wanted to bring up, is that sort of the power of our own ability to reinvent history
Mhm.
for
Mhm.
good and for bad,
Mhm.
and the power of reinventing ourselves for good and for bad. And again, both sides. There's no,
Right
I
or wrong.
I
There's no
really
this or
don't
that.
like right to wrong, Carol. And I know you know this, but there's so much gray in the world. There's so many shadows. And I think that when we start saying this way is right or this way is wrong, is when then we miss all the most beautiful parts about being alive and about being human, is that, we're figuring it out all the time and we're changing.
Mhm. And towards the end, Hilly talks about to love us to do the hard things. And that's such a great line. And it just is, it's not just about showing up, it's about being there. And you work to have her grow emotionally as you write. Is that true? Because I feel like
Mm.
she grew as the story was going on. Was there any moment where you had her like, oh wait, I've got her in this direction, I've got to retool her, or was it pretty organic as you started writing?
Uh, it was pretty, I knew from the beginning that she could not stay the way she was,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Because otherwise, she, I mean, she was like gonna crack up. She was just, it was too much. So I knew I needed her to either grow or, I mean, not to be harsh, but kill your darlings, or she needed to be done away with in the story, because otherwise you can't just have a static character. She needed to go somewhere. And so I also, I love Hilly. I hurt
Mhm.
for her. I feel, and I don't know if it's saying, break out in a little bit of a sweat talking about her, because I see, I empathize with her deeply as a person. And I don't know what that says about me, maybe, but just that she wants so badly to be seen. And yet, by forcing people to see her in the way that she thinks they want to see her, she is actually so unseen. She is
Mhm.
so lost in herself and hidden. And I think that again, to what I just talked about Instagram and Facebook, is something that all of our culture is really struggling with right now. And so even though she's back in the 1970s, that's still appropriate to young people who I hope read this, young people, 19, 20-year-old people, who say, gosh, I struggle with that. I struggle with, what I put out there. And so, yeah, I definitely wanted her to grow. All the characters, though, I wanted them to grow. And also, they are conflicted from the start. So they, like Willie Mae, she at the very beginning comes off very self-confident, right? She's like going to this island, she's doing this. But then I wanted her to have many, many moments where you see through that veneer of confidence that she's actually doesn't really know what she's doing. And she's
Mhm.
actually really, really insecure. And she actually feels weird about her body. And she's not as like bravado Texas beauty queen as she comes off. She is everything that she pushes forward as her strength.
Mhm.
I wanted to show that there was actually an element of weakness there to it. And
Mhm.
again, this, maybe it's just how I psychologically analyze my characters, but I want them all to have um struggles where it's like a dichotomy inside of themselves that they are trying to work out constantly.
Mhm.
So
That gives
confusing.
attention to the book. It gives attention to the book. How about the chapter titles? Were those always there? Or would you write them as you were going, or did you go back and write those?
Some I wrote, like if I knew it, right? You know, sometimes it's like you wrote the chapter and you're like, this is the title, boom,
Title.
done. And then other times it would just be like, I would just put X's across, like a bunch of X's, because I didn't know. And then I'd have to go back at the end of the whole book, of writing the whole book, and look at it almost objectively and say, what is this chapter actually about? And then I would come up with the title. But and then some of them came to me in song form. That was just, and this is something that readers, and I know you know, but readers will find out, is that so Haley is very visual, you know, and she's a Vogue model, and Joanne is a musician. So I got to play with the senses. So for Hilly, everything's very tactile and visual. And then for Joanne, everything was very musical and sound oriented. And I thought that was really fun to play with. So some of the titles came as songs, music songs that I then just switched the words up for copyright infringement.
For original Robbins. But you know, it's really funny because you also have like the moments with Mick Jagger and, you know, the current wife, Bianca. You know, it was like all the stuff it gives all just flavor to the book as well. Was the title always Mystique Island, or did you play around with that?
It was actually, but it wasn't the full. It was just Mystique for a long time. It was just from page one at Mystique, that was what I called it. And we changed it to Mystique Island because rightfully so, all of my team, Harper Collins, said, people are going to think that we like misspelled Mystique and it's like a typo. Or they're going to say, well, what is Mystique? Is it a perfume? Is it a, you know, like without any visual going on with it, just the name Mystique, people were thinking, is it mustaches? Is it the French? Because it is the French word for mosquito. Like what is this Mystique? Yeah. And so that's when then we decided on Mystique Island. So that way there was no doubt what it was, but it was always Mystique.
The cover's great. The cover is really, really terrific. There's everything from the type font, everything just really looks great. Was this the first cover? Or did you play around with it?
There were a bunch of different, well, I think there were 9 actually. So there were 9 different images, right? With different fonts on it. But they were all islands. They were all sort of visuals of islands. And I just I wanted blue and green. And some of the other island images were more like sunset islands, like pinks and sherbets. And I fought for the blue and green. I said, green is the color of Mystique, the Mystique green. And if you can tell, I love blue is my favorite color.
Right.
I am about water. I'm a water, you know, I just love it. And so I was drawn to the blue and green, which was this particular one. And then I have to say though, before they put the stripage on it, which is a tiny little thing.
Yes.
But that really made it pop. That gave it that 70s, like, you know.
The font is completely, you can see at the beginning of a movie in the 70s, the front of a Bond movie. And I also love that you just see one building because the island was that deserted, you know, that you're only seeing the one, you know.
Oh yeah, that, you know, that building right there is so, the architecture of it is so 70s that I loved that they chose that.
Totally plays through.
I was so happy with the cover, how it came out. I really could not have asked for more. I think, you know, as soon as I saw it all put together, I wrote my team and I said, bingo, you have got it. I love it. Don't mess it. Just perfect. So
don't do anything for there. And in the back, you've got a bunch of books that people can read if they want to read more, which I love that are in the back of the books. I just love that. Do you do book group chats? Do you do book group chats? Do you have time for those?
Them. I do them all the time. And I'm from the old school days when we used to do Skypes.
Yes, remember Skyping? Yes, remember
Skyping.
Skyping?
So I would book club Skype all the time. So I really enjoy that. It's a way for me to invite book clubbers into my office and
Right,
home.
right.
And I get to go into theirs. And I know there's some people say, oh, well, what about like Zoom fatigue? I don't believe in that. You know what I mean? Not when we're like far away like this and we can have a conversation like this.
Yeah, a lot of people complain about it, but I think that if you're getting something done, it's fine. If you're just sitting in a meeting, it's boring. But if you're getting something done, and I always feel like I'm getting something done, that I couldn't do it. Ugh. Is this your first book in a contemporary setting or more contemporary, or am I losing my mind? This is the
I've done back and forth. So like, yeah. So the Mapmaker's Children, that one is contemporary West Virginia. And then John Brown, so abolitionist Civil War, West Virginia. And then The Baker's Daughter, again, is contemporary El Paso, and then World War II Germany. So I've never done one that was entirely, and I think this is kind of contemporary, but I am told that the 1970s are now considered historical, which is just crazy. I'm told the 1980s are historical. I'm told actually the 90s, I heard someone say, oh, it's historical fiction. It's set in like 1991. I was like, 91? Are you crazy?
I remember when Kristen Hanna's, one of her books, they said it was going to be historical fiction. She goes, it was the 70s. Like, really? Is this really? And they said, yes, that's the category for it. So just know, in the Goodreads Awards, it would be the historical fiction category. You know,
I mean, I don't know if they're gonna and you know what? I'm fine however they want to categorize. I don't care as long as they read it. Yeah.
But have you listened to the audiobook at all? Cassandra Campbell's doing the narration. Did you listen?
I love her.
Love her.
I love her. I've heard the the excerpt of her audio is on my website. And so she did my last book. She did my last two books. So this is her third book with me. And I just, not only is her voice amazing and her affectations of all the different characters, accents is perfect, but she is one of the most loving people too, as an actor and as a person. So I've gotten into audiobooks.
You are listening more.
I love an audiobook. I constantly, Libro FM is my jam. Yeah. I am constantly reading all day and writing. And then for relaxation at night, I put in my earbuds and I wash dishes and I do laundry and I walk the dog and I'm listening to an audiobook. So I was just in Paris. And so of course, what did I listen to? Lucy Foley's new one, the Paris Apartment. Yeah. So I love, and so, I'm all about the audiobooks. I think they're fantastic. And this one that Cass has done is just, she did a spectacular job with Mystique Island.
Well, do you know what's really interesting is it used to be when an author asked, like, how's my book doing? It would be the print sales. And now it's print, and audio. And audio can be a huge percentage of sales. And I know that in my book group, I'm in this book group with the young moms who are nice enough to let me be in the book group with them. And it's really funny because a lot of them listen, because it's the only way they would get through the book. And they said they can do it while they're doing the dishes, while they're doing other things, you can actually be getting something done. So I find that really interesting that it used to be like your rights to Finland, like the money would matter, like your rights to Finland. And now it's like, oh, this is like a real thing. This really matters. This is important.
I love the audiobook world. Like you said, you can, and also it gives readers a break. So if they're reading all day and then they just want something in their ear. And then there's also, like, at least in Mystique Island, there's so much music or musicality and languages, British and American, Texan, and then and Mick Jagger shows up and Princess Mark, that I feel like the audiobook is just so perfect to capture all those different sounds. Right. So I really
love that moment where when Anne's leaving the island and telling him to sell it. We realize that she has two small children at home, including one that's still taking a bottle. And you just realize these people just left their lives to go do this, like, fun kind of thing. And I think that was like this really telling line about, oh, there we go. Just off to be ourselves, off to have fun.
Yeah.
I still
Yeah.
think we should go. I still think we should go. We should go to one of those houses that has a name, and we should get like our favorite people and go and do the house. I think
I
we really should.
realized after I said, well, I don't really need to go. And then right after it came out of my mouth, I was like, I would really like to go. If
Oh,
anyone
these
wants to
places,
invite me, I will go.
these people come with a housekeeper. I mean, they tell you what the staff is that's with each house.
That's
And
a
I'm
great
like,
book club adventure, like to
exactly.
go with, because those houses they house, like you just said, like 10 people more, a dozen, whatever.
We just won't
Like
go June to September or October because we don't want to be in a hurricane, because
that.
we got one of those in the book too, people. We've got one of those in the book because if you're in the islands, that's got to happen.
I mean, my grandparents to this day, it's like, oh, well, it's hurricane season. We're just getting ready because we know it's going to happen. Yeah.
Well, years ago, I did a sales meeting when I was at the magazine, and we went to St. John, and we were on the last flight out before the hurricane came in that year. And later on, the accounting department is saying to me, you don't have a bill. And I said, no, they just told us to leave. And there's like, but you need to have a bill, call the front desk. I said, do you understand there is no front desk? Like the front desk is like gone. Like we may not have to pay if they're doing paper. Like if there's no backup, it was the most interesting conversation to have. And I said, do you understand? I can't call these people and ask them for that right now. This is not their priority. It's like turning the water back on.
Yeah.
It's really funny. Like what I still remember that conversation, and it went on for weeks. It was like, can't you just call them? And I'm like, no, they're not answering the phone.
My God.
Sarah, this was so much fun as always. I hope to see you in person soon. But you know
Yes.
what? We have Zoom. We have our Zoom lives,
Yes, but I would love to, I will see, anywhere, anyhow, anytime, I will come and see you. I miss, being able
Hanging
to
out.
do things.
Yeah. Big miss
in
hanging
person,
out.
so.
Well, I look forward to seeing you next time. I wish you so much success with Mystique Island. To our readers, look forward to seeing you next time on Book Reporter Talks To. Don't remember, you can subscribe on YouTube and never miss an episode, or you can subscribe to our podcast. Same thing, won't miss an episode there as well. Sarah, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, and thank you, readers, for reading. I hope you enjoy going to Mystique Island.
Armchair travel. Thanks,
Yeah.
everyone.